Live from the Scripps Studios, this is 10 News.
Unrest continued in San Diego tonight as demonstrators put their frustrations on display once again. Good evening. I'm Steve Atkinson.
And I'm Kimberly Hunt. Protesters are marching into the night downtown, demanding justice and change. That's where we find our 10 News reporter, Anthony Pura.
Two large demonstrations in San Diego today, one in the suburbs and one here downtown. Hundreds of people at both wanting their voices heard. Demonstrators on the move again Tuesday, marching against racial injustice following the death of George Floyd.
No peace!
The group making its way from Balboa Park to the county administration building and then continuing on through downtown to the Civic Center. Meanwhile, another group bringing their message to the suburbs. The demonstration front and center at the intersection of Rancho Bernardo Road and Camino del Norte and Forest Ranch.
George Floyd! George Floyd!
Crowds waving signs, chanting, drivers honking in support. The demonstration remaining peaceful but passionate.
People are frustrated. They are disgusted.
I'm a black woman having grown up in the Poway community, and although there are few of us, our lives matter, our voices matter, and we need representation.
In downtown, the crowds continuing to gather into the night, chanting along Waterfront Parkway, emotional and persistent in their call for change against a system they say doesn't work.
White silence promotes police violence. And that means if you're not with these people, you're basically against them.
At this point, we don't know what's going to happen, and we're kind of getting to the point like we don't care what happens. We just want to see change, and if we get hurt in between that, that's us.
In downtown San Diego, Anthony Pura, 10 News.
And those protests continued for the 8th straight day all across the country. They stretch from coast to coast. In Washington, D.C., protests turned violent near the White House. And back here in California, police and protesters, they faced off in a tense standoff in L.A. The Dolby Theater is now being surrounded by the National Guard. As ABC's Alex Perche reports, the other officers present when George Floyd died could soon be charged.
Tonight, the family of George Floyd anticipating additional charges for those former Minneapolis police officers in his case. The family attorney saying this on CNN.
We believe that there will be charges of the other 3 officers before George Floyd is laid to rest.
The state's attorney general saying they'll be coming soon.
Hey, look, we're doing this as fast as we can.
And today, the mother of George Floyd's 6-year-old daughter speaking out for the first time.
He will never see her grow up, graduate. He will never walk her down the aisle.
At the site of Floyd's death, the community's coming together. Donations pouring in. Water, food, even masks. These local business owners handing out roses to sympathizers for free.
You can come here and cry. You can come here and pray. You can come here and mingle and talk and hug people.
So much of the scene here is about preserving the memory of George Floyd, from protesters remaining peaceful to them rushing to cover the signs and flowers with tarps as the rains come in.
Images of peaceful protests from across the country just hours before new curfews go into effect. San Francisco, Orlando, Houston, New York City, thousands marching without incident. But some cities experiencing violence and looting overnight. In New York, windows smashed, stores ransacked, from the Macy's flagship store to Rockefeller Plaza. The city moved up its curfew to 8 p.m. tonight after the 4th night of looting. The governor today blasting the mayor and the police department.
They have to do a better job. But separate the protesters from the looting.
LA's police chief sparking outrage after suggesting looters were as responsible for George Floyd's death as those fired police officers.
We didn't have people mourning the death of this man, George Floyd. We had people capitalizing. His death is on their hands, as much as it is those officers.
The chief later apologizing, calling his own words terribly offensive. And today, LA officers kneeling with protesters at a faith-based march. Alex Brachet, ABC News, Minneapolis.
Meantime, many religious leaders and politicians are condemning President Trump's recent actions. They are questioning why he used government forces to remove peaceful protesters from a park last night for a photo opportunity. This was outside that historic Washington, D.C. church. A source tells ABC News that Attorney General William Barr gave the order to forcefully remove those demonstrators. The president was photographed holding up a Bible in front of St. John's Church.
He is not entitled to use the spiritual symbolism of our sacred spaces and our sacred texts to promote or to justify a entirely different message.
Today, the president and the first lady visited a D.C. shrine to St. John Paul II. D.C.'s archbishop called it a publicity stunt. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden also condemned that photo op.
I just wish he opened it once in a while instead of brandishing it. If he opened it, he could have learned something.
Biden also called on Congress to ban chokeholds and vowed to establish a National Police Oversight Commission.
Law enforcement around the country feeling the impacts of these protests caused by the action of a former fellow officer. Today, an NYPD officer is in the hospital with serious injuries after being hit by a car. We want to warn you, this video is graphic. NYPD releasing the video of an officer responding to reports of break-ins in the Bronx when a car speeds down the road and hits him. The driver has not been found. The officer is expected to survive. In Las Vegas, an officer is on life support after being shot in the head outside the Circus Hotel and Casino. In St. Louis, 4 officers were shot in 2 separate incidents during the unrest in the city's downtown area. All 4 have been released from the hospital. Also in St. Louis, retired police captain David Dorn was shot and killed outside a pawn shop that was being looted during the protests. Dorn was trying to stop the looting when he was gunned down. And breaking news within the past half hour in the El Cerrito area. A man was taken to the hospital after being shot several times. Our 10 News breaking news tracker was at the scene earlier tonight at 56th and Adelaide Avenue. Police tell us there was some sort of altercation at a home and shots were fired. They say the suspected shooter took off. There's no suspect description at this time.
The moratorium on evictions in San Diego County will be extended at least another month. Supervisors voted unanimously today to extend that moratorium through the end of June. It had expired May 31st. Renters must provide documentation showing their inability to pay is now directly linked to this pandemic. The back rent will still have to be paid back at a later date. Right now, sunbathing and relaxing on the sand is allowed here in San Diego County beaches. All groups must be part of the same household, but recreational activities, including football or volleyball, are still prohibited on the beach. Parking lots and piers, they're also still closed, and it's up to each city to reopen their boardwalks.
Here are the latest coronavirus numbers. The county announced another 120 cases today, bringing the total to 7,600. There were also another 7 deaths, bringing the total to 276.
New at 11 o'clock, the Escondido Police Department is still trying to get answers 1 month after 2 brothers, their grandmother and her boyfriend, were killed by a driver. The victims were just walking on San Pasqual Valley Road and Oak Hill Drive when they were hit. Since then, police have been trying to find surveillance video that may have captured the crash and executed search warrants on the vehicle and the driver's phone. The driver did stop at the scene and was injured. At the time of the crash, police said they did not believe drugs or alcohol were a factor. And 2 people were arrested by sheriff's deputies after a group of protesters in Santee reported a woman driving by in a pickup pointed a gun at them. This incident happened last night at the intersection of Cuyamaca Street and Mission Gorge Road. 2 adults were with the child. They were in the car and detained. Deputies did find a semi-automatic handgun with 2 loaded magazines in the truck. It was registered to the man driving the car.
Speaking of Santee, that city is once again under curfew tonight. It started at 7 o'clock and lasts until 6 a.m. There's also a curfew in La Mesa from 7 to 5:30. People should stay off the streets unless they're going to work or dealing with an emergency.
I must admit that I was bottled up with tears as I visited the site that George Floyd was killed because I just cannot get over how painful it was to watch.
Local activist Shane Harris joined community protests in Minneapolis. He also stood next to Floyd's brother while he shared a message of peace and reform.
Enough is enough. We need deliverables for our community. The looters and the rioters are not where the message should be focused, but it should be focused on Black-led organizations and institutions that gravely need support from our allies.
Harris is now calling on the Sheriff's Department to follow SDPD's lead and ban the carotid restraint. Sheriff Bill Gore, who strongly condemned the killing of George Floyd, has said it can be an effective non-lethal tool if used the right way. He also pointed out what was done to Floyd is not a carotid restraint. That was something that should have never been done.